Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Joy, would you please call the roll?
Hamilton,
Yes.
Rasmussen,
Yes.
Revelinsky,
Yes.
Flournoy,
Yes.
Ledger Kalin.
Yes.
Hammes.
Yes.
Hallie.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any changes to this evening's agenda, Council?
I would like to ask permission to address a subject that's been brought to me by some constituents of mine down in our neighborhood, if that would be all right.
All right, let's put that under committee reports then.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Also, Council, we have a long agenda tonight. We have Andy from Burbach Associates with us tonight, and Andy's traveling, so I think I want to move him up in the agenda. So I think right after our public forum, we will ask Andy to give us a presentation on the pool project. And then also, I know that there are a number of citizens here this evening who are concerned about a neighborhood zoning issue. And I think I'm going to move that up as well. Our city attorney, John Marcy's here. John, I'm going to move your report up a little bit on the agenda tonight. So we'll do that after the pool report and then continue with our agenda. So first we'll then move to our consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes from the August 11th council meeting, a resolution for employment of Park and Rec employee, approval of liquor licenses for Pep Stop and Best Western, and approval of claims in the amount of $454,745.36. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Moved by Hamilton, second by Flournoy. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Next, regarding our public appearances, turn this over to Councilman Flournoy, who will introduce our next guest to give a presentation on city administrator search.
Yes, tonight we have Mr. Patrick Callahan of Callahan Municipal Associates or Consultants, and he's going to give us a presentation on his firm's address the city administrator search and what he can offer the city in that regard. Remember, this is our second firm that we're looking at. We have one more in 2 weeks, and then we hope to have our city administrator here by January 1st. So, Patrick.
Okay. Well, thank you, Doug. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here. I passed around a yellow sheet. Did everybody get a copy of that?
It's still going around.
Okay. I'm going to pass that around, and I will go through that very quickly with you, and then I hope to allow quite a bit of time for any questions that you've got. Like I said, appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. What I'm going to talk about is just very briefly my background, my experience, how I approach the search process, and then we'll open up for questions. My background in city government. I started 40 years ago this year in 1974, and I'm your neighbor to the east, Fort Madison. I was there 3 years, and then also one of the other neighbors to the east, West Point. I was city administrator there. In fact, I was their first city administrator. And then in 1978, went to Maquoketa. And then I took a break and did consulting, but came back to city work in 2010 in Anamosa. I tell people I don't know what this means, but I started my career in a prison town, and I ended my career in a prison town. But that's what happened, and I'm a firm believer every high school senior needs a tour of the penitentiaries, one of them. My consulting career goes back to the Institute of Public Affairs when a gentleman named Tim Shields hired me as a consultant for the Institute. And then I also did consulting on the side as well, and that's when I started doing searches. With a gentleman named Jim Brimmeyer out of Minnesota. And basically what I know about searches, I learned from Jim, having done it a number of times. I also worked with a company called Ruan Securities Corporation, did bond issues, and I also worked with an engineering firm out of Cedar Rapids, and then recently started my own firm as a consultant for cities. But my experience in searches, basically I did 10 searches with the Brimmeyer Group, and then I did 7 with Schneider and Associates, and since I went on my own a year ago, I've done 4 searches. And you saw in the proposal that I gave you, I listed all the searches I've done and given you references from every single one of those searches I've done here in recent years. But I've been on kind of your side of the table as well, because I think if you want to be someone who does this sort of thing, it's very valuable to sit in your seat. And I've never been on a city council, but I've been on a number of boards over the years where we have selected executive directors or someone who would have a position similar to the city manager position or city administrator. I was on the Iowa League of Cities Board of Directors for a while, the Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities. I was also on the Regional Planning Commission, and actually I was on the one in Burlington for a few years when I was in Fort Madison. But twice I was on the East Central Governmental Association out at Butte, at which time, both times, we ended up picking an executive director and going through a search process. And lastly, I sit on a East Central Iowa Housing Trust Fund board up in Cedar Rapids. So been in positions similar to what you have. Here's my approach. My first job is to learn as much about you as I can. You as an individual council member, and as a council as a group, and also then about the community and the position and all of your department heads. Once I have that big picture of the community and the individuals who are actively involved with the city, I write a position profile. And one of the things I sent you was the one I recently did for Fort Madison. That is my marketing tool. That is what I use to get people to take a look at your position in your community. So the next thing I do is market the city by calling people I know in Iowa. I have never worked anywhere but Iowa. So when you work in Iowa for 40 years, and I've known Bob Rasmussen for many years, in fact, Bob might be one of the first people I ever met years ago. So I don't know how far back we go, but it's well over 35 years. But when you're in this business for that many years, you get to know a lot of people. And so I know a lot of folks around the state of Iowa. I know virtually all the city managers or city administrators around the state. And so a lot of times I will email them that position profile and say, why don't you take a look at this position? See if it's something that might be what you're looking for. And I'll also pick up the phone and call them as well and try and entice them to take a look. So my job is to coordinate the process, to make sure we stay on track and we find the person who is the right fit for the community. And the other part of my job at the very end is what I call close the deal. Once you tell me who is the person that is the best fit for your community, we have to close the deal and reach an agreement and put together an employment agreement, which, by the way, I don't know if you've read your league magazine this month, but I have an article in there. The Iowa League of Cities has an article on page 14 and 15 that I wrote for them. And it's on this process of, quote, closing the deal and writing the employment agreement that a lot of cities will use. So if you go to page 14 and 15, you'll see my article. So, and I have a good, close working relationship with the league for many years. I do a lot of the workshops for the leagues. Joy has seen me at Ames doing a lot of the workshops for city clerks, city administrators, and I purposely do that to get to know these folks, to get to know potential candidates for this position. Basically, in the end, though, you make the decisions. I have a process laid out for you. I have a price tag and all the different steps of the process. You tell me what you want me to do. You tell me which steps in the process you want me to do, which steps you maybe have someone else do. Maybe you or a member of the staff. For example, in Guttenberg, Iowa, one of the searches I recently did, they wanted to do the first 5 or 6 steps themselves, which was fine. They had the time and the capability, so they did the first 5 or 6 steps, and then I took it from there and finished it. You tell me what makes sense here, because I am not the type of consultant that says this is the way you do it and there's no other way of doing it. Every one of these is a little different. I tweak them a little bit every time I do them. So the other thing is that I have the council make the decision as to the level of involvement you want your citizens to be in, to partake in this process. In Vinton, Iowa, for example, they did a public forum, which I facilitated, in which we heard people come forward and say, this is the type of city manager, city administrator we're looking for. We want someone with this capability and this background. So if you want to do that, I'm more than happy to do that. Confidentiality. Many candidates will not apply unless you pledge to them there's confidentiality of their application. But in the end, you'll make that decision. I will give you the pros and cons of that decision, but in the end, you'll make that decision. But we'll need to make it fairly early in the process so the candidates know where you're coming from. You will select the finalist. And the way I do that is I bring all the applications and resumes with you. I have reviewed them, ranked them, and I will show you what I've come up with. You tell me then if you agree or disagree with how I've ranked those candidates. From there, then we'll pick the finalists for telephone interviews. And then lastly, in fact, tomorrow night I'm in Fort Madison. We're doing telephone interviews in Fort Madison tomorrow night. We'll have 8 telephone interviews, half hour each on the half hour. It's a grueling night. It's interesting, but time goes pretty fast. In the end, they will rank those candidates for me from 1 to 8. and I'll do a composite score of all the candidates, and the top 4 will be the ones that we select for the final interview. And then that'll be September 11th and 12th. I come back to Fort Madison. I got a process that I've described in my proposal. We can tweak that any way you want. For example, Fort Madison, when they saw my process, they tweaked it a couple different places, which I'm more than happy to do. So in the end, I do what I trust the collective wisdom of all of you. You know this community better than anyone else. You know it better than me. Although I will get to know a lot about you in the process. Your collective wisdom will be what no one person will pick the next city administrator, but all of you together will. And so I've come to trust that collective wisdom. My commitment is I will keep you informed, and particularly the mayor. I'm usually in regular contact with the mayor. For example, I talked to the Fort Madison mayor this morning and brought him up to date on a few things. But I will keep you informed. I will keep you involved from beginning to end. My commitment to the candidates, because there's another side to this. In order to maintain credibility with the candidates, particularly Iowa candidates, I'm brutally honest with them. I will tell them exactly what I've learned in my discussions with you so that there's no surprises on your end or their end. I do not want a candidate 5 months from now saying, Callahan, why didn't you tell me this? I will tell them everything I know, the good and the bad, because every community has their certain issues that they deal with. I will go into great detail with all the finalists for this position so they know exactly what this community is all about and what they will encounter, so that they know going in, this is what they can expect to see. The same thing with you. I will show you all the strong points and all the weak points of all the candidates as best I know them, and present them to both sides. Bottom line, like I said, no surprises on either side. The end result is we pick a candidate, or you pick a candidate, that is the right fit for Fairfield, Iowa at this point in your history. May not be the right fit 10 years from now. May not have been the right fit 10 years previous to this, but the right point at this point in your history. So with that, I'll open it up. Any questions you got?
Pat, I'd like to start with just asking, how is the market out there right now? Now you have a process ongoing with a similar size city.
We do.
In Fort Madison. What's the market look like for interest?
They had 27 applications, and I'll be quite honest with you, there weren't the strongest applications that you would normally see, but they have a salary range that is a little lower than a salary range for a comparable sized city. They're advertising $84,000 to $96,000. My prime candidates that I would have normally recruited are already at that salary range, in towns of 5,000 or 6,000. What it'll come down to is what kind of salary range you advertise will then determine the number of applicants and the level of experience that they have. And I don't know what salary range the previous administrator was at. Can anyone tell me? Similar? Okay.
90,
When we recruited, I think it was 80 to 90,
Yeah.
probably.
Like a lot of things in life, it all comes down to the dollars. And if you're on kind of the lower end of the spectrum, the number of candidates and their level of experience will be slightly less than if you have a salary a little bit higher on that spectrum. A lot of towns your size like to reach out to that candidate that's in the town of 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000. Well, I can tell you, I've got access to the city manager salary survey that was been done, and a lot of those folks in that 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 are in that 85,000 to 90,000 range. For example, the gentleman who is in Macokota, where I used to be, he's at 95,000 right now, town of 6,000. I'm not going to be able to, I couldn't recruit him for Fort Madison, and I wouldn't be able to recruit him here because, he wouldn't take the salary cut. So once again, to answer your question, it'll all come down to where we're at on money. Other questions that anyone has?
What is your interview process? You talked about a phone interview, and then where do you go from there?
After the phone interview, we narrow it down to, I like to work with about 4 finalists. I also like to have a backup or 2 because I've learned you will lose candidates because they're all actively searching for jobs, or they wouldn't have applied for this one. And what I like to do is a 2-part process. I bring them in, for example, on Thursday of the September 11th, the 4 finalists will come to Fort Madison, and we'll give them a tour of the town. They'll get to meet the department heads, which I think it's crucial they meet the department heads, the people they're going to work with, your city hall staff. And I also like to see what your staff and department heads have to say, too, after they've had a chance to spend an hour and a half with them. And then following the tour, then I like to have a chance for citizens in the community to meet them and for the candidates to kind of do a brief introduction. Or if you don't do that, make arrangements to meet with a real estate agent, school officials, so they can get a good feel for the housing market in schools. And then we follow that up in the evening, maybe an opportunity to meet very informally with the council. And so that's the first day. The second day is a two-part process, and you're going to hear other consultants talk about a similar process, but I take the council members and I break them in rooms with 2 or 3 in each room, so we don't have a quorum. And then I have the candidates go from room to room and just sit at the table across from each other, and I have a list of questions that you can pick and choose from. And so you spend about an hour with them just in a across the table, look in their eye type conversation. It's not a real formal interview, but it is an interview. And then after that, I bring the entire council together, and each candidate then comes before the council. And I have a kind of a 3-part process then. I say, pretend for the moment you are the city administrator. Pick a topic and give us a presentation on, so that you could see how they would, interact with you in a council meeting. Then I also then have the regular interview questions that you would typically see. And then occasionally I do a self-evaluation process where I challenge the candidate and say to them, here's what we're using as our criteria for selecting our finalists. How do you rank yourself? How do you see yourselves in terms of your budgeting finance background, your zoning enforcement background? I have a list of things. It's interesting to see how they evaluate themselves. And this is something I just started here with the last 2 or 3 searches. And then lastly, they ask questions. Following that, then the council as a whole then will discuss what we've learned. I will share with you what we found on a Google search. I will share with you what I found on reference checks, what I've learned about their credit history, and a number of other things that we'll delve into, so that you then have a complete picture. The goal is that you've seen them on an informal basis on Friday night or Friday afternoon. You've sat across the table from them for an hour on Saturday morning, and then you've seen them in a formal interview setting before the entire council. And then you've heard my research that I've done on their backgrounds and their experience. So what I do is, in fact, we can pass this around. You will all get a 3-ring binder like that that will contain information about all the candidates, what we're going to do the entire day, and there's a section then for each of the 4 candidates. I don't mind you see those names because all 4 of those individuals now have jobs, which makes me feel good because we had some strong candidates. And so, but every one of you will get a 3-ring binder like that, will have the resumes, the cover letters, transcripts from their college, copies of their diploma, examples of their writing skills, and actually a completed city application too, because I'd like to see them complete a city application and see what they put down in that application. So you'll have a complete picture, and you'll get that about 3 or 4 days in advance, so that you have a few days to review that and really get to know these individuals before they even come to Fairfield.
So what is a competitive wage for a city of our size to get a more qualified candidate than a $90,000 range?
You're probably going to be a competitive wage, you're probably going to be in that 95 to 105, 110 range. But I have, like I said, I've got access to the salary surveys that have been done. And so as part of this process, I would suggest we take a look at what other cities your size are paying, and I'll give you the name of the town, the number of employees, population, so you can kind of do a side-by-side comparison. In the end, you will define what the salary range is. And
you mentioned something about Iowa. Are you recruiting outside of Iowa or just staying within the state?
both. I like to advertise throughout the nation, because you never know. That right candidate may not be an Iowa person, but they may have Iowa connections or a motivation to come back to Iowa. My strongest area is Iowa candidates. I know them. I've known them for years. And so that's where my strong suit is. But I do not recommend that you limit your search to just Iowa people. You want to open it up to a lot of people. For example, in Fort Madison, 27 of the candidates, 10 of them were from Iowa. And I knew probably 6 or 7 out of 10 of those candidates, or I knew someone that knew them.
How many are finalists?
In the finalists, we have the 8 now. We have 3 of them from Iowa.
Okay, so it's most of them are out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So, but no, I don't like to limit it to just Iowa. I like to open it up. let's face it though, Iowa candidates will have an advantage. They'll have an edge, because they will probably know me and they will probably know Iowa law. But in the end, you will decide how much of an edge they have. So,
Over the last 4 years, you've done 11 searches,
right.
according to your paperwork here. Of those 11 searches and placements, how many of those are still in the positions that were hired for?
I think the 10 out of 11 are still,
10 of the
yeah,
11.
as far as I know. Yeah. The one that is not there, he retired. He retired a little sooner than what he probably would have liked to because he and the mayor just did not hit it off. He got along fine with the council, but he and the mayor had their differences. And so he decided, hey, I'm old enough to retire. I can get the pension, so let's go for it.
Pat, I think one of the unique things that you bring to us is what you've described as your connection to Iowa and so many people. If we were at the right salary range and you were about to get the job, you got some people in mind right now?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Yeah. Okay.
We'd heard from another consultant assurances that he would make for a particular time period after the hire was made. Does your firm have any of that type of assistance available, or is this something that you would do?
I do have a section in my proposal where I talk about that. Yes, I will. If the person, and I think I have 18 months as a period of time, where I would come back and do the search over again for a very reduced fee of $3,000. Some people will come back and do it for totally free. I don't. I will do it for a very reduced fee. But yeah, I do have something in my proposal on that. Yes. Yeah. And typically what I say is to the council and to the candidates, I have to have your commitment that you're going to insist that they be a member of the International City Management Association and that they will abide by the ICMA Code of Ethics. If I have a candidate that tells me they're not abiding by the ICMA Code of Ethics, I will not recommend that candidate to you because the ICMA Code of Ethics says you will accept this job and you will commit to stay there for at least 2 years unless there's something so horrible that you can't possibly tolerate it any longer. So that's my protection too, is that I want them to commit to the ICMA Code of Ethics, and then I don't have to worry too much about them jumping ship after, say, a year or so, because they will literally ruin their career by doing that. They'll really ruin their career in Iowa because word will get out. And also, if they don't have good reason for leaving, we can report that to the ICMA in Washington, D.C., and they could be possibly censured. So I don't worry too much about that. As long as you're in agreement, they will be an ICMA member, and they will be asked to abide by the Code of Ethics. I actually put that in the employment agreement. I don't know if your employment agreement you had with the previous administrator had that in there, but I will insist that that be part of your employment agreement, that they abide by the ICMA Code of Ethics. Because I don't think you want to hire them if they don't agree to that.
I've already asked.
Sorry. Patrick, you, in your proposal, you mentioned that you offer follow-up services in terms of helping to evaluate
Right.
The performance of the administrator in their first year. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yes, it's. I think I have a fee in there. I can't remember exactly what the amount was, but I have a fee in there that I will actually come back and coordinate the review process. And typically what I'll do is I'll show you 4 or 5 different types of evaluation forms, and then you can look them over and pick the one that you think best fits with what you would like to do. And then once you do that, I will ask each and every council member to do a written evaluation. And then they get turned into me. And then I do a summary of them. And then I sit down privately with the candidate and kind of go through them and say, this is what came back on the written evaluations. And then once I've met privately with your city administrator, then I like to have a committee or council committee of the whole, in which we kind of review the evaluation process. The city administrator at that time can sign a statement asking for a closed session because we're talking about performance evaluation. Or if they don't sign it, then obviously it becomes an open session. But then we sit down and just kind of talk things out. And I also tell folks this is a two-way street, because if they have some things that they want to talk about, we'll do that as well. And I'm of the firm opinion you shouldn't wait till 6 months to do it. I'm of the firm opinion you should do kind of a mini review at the end of 3 months, just to make sure that, things are going as you expect. And if I don't see any red flags or any problems, then we save the big review for the 6-month period. But I think it's important that early on, you kind of give these folks some direction as to whether or not they're meeting your expectations.
You provided us the profile that you gave for Fort Madison.
Correct.
Is that something that we review before you actually send it out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was sent to all the council members and the mayor in Fort Madison, sent to their emails, and then they were advised if there's anything in there you want to change, let us know before it goes out. And then once they signed off on it, then it went on their website, and then I started using it as my marketing tool to send out to potential candidates. In fact, I think I have a space on my timetable for you to give your approval of that profile. It's part of the timetable.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, I think we had a couple more minutes left. If there are any final questions?
Any chance we could get this electronically instead of a binder?
You sure can, yeah. If you can take a big PDF file, we can do that, yeah. I'll work with any way you want, so. Yeah.
Well, great. Pat, thank you very much. We really appreciate you making an appearance tonight, and obviously, you have a great level of experience and good ties in Iowa, and I think that would be valuable to us. As you know, as Doug mentioned earlier, we do have one more interview in 2 weeks, and we will quickly make a decision after that, so hopefully we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. I
All right.
would look forward to working with you. I'd love to come back to your community because I did your cable franchise work
That's
a number of years ago. In fact, Ed was just coming on as mayor at the
Right.
time, so.
That's where I
Gentleman named
remember.
Dick Reed. What was that?
So that's where I remember you.
Oh, okay. Were you on the council then?
Yeah, I was at that.
Okay. Yeah, Dick Reed brought me in and asked me to be a part of that. So, yeah, we had a committee that worked on it. So I'm assuming I answered all of your 10 or 11 questions adequately, right? Okay.
Yes, I think so.
They were
Thanks.
included in the email.
Yeah, it was included in your packet that I gave you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, council, invite Dave Neff to give us a presentation about Oktoberfest. Dave? And Karin's going to join you as well? Good.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Chief, we appreciate the opportunity to come before you. This will be our 8th year for providing Oktoberfest as part of the Art Walk.
Oh, and then
So we have good quality history behind us. If I remember a year ago, there was some discussion about Saturday morning cleanup, and we will make sure that we have proper scoopers that are out there because we will only have carriage rides. We will not have a horse parade this coming year. Is that right?
Yes.
So just one horse to worry about.
One horse to worry about, not a whole herd of horses.
We can handle that.
We are scheduled for our Friday, the 3rd of October, and the only requests that we have in front of you are for the carriage rides to be boarded and unboarded, deboarded, get off the carriage. Departed, okay. On the south side of the square, so the only barricades we would need would be along the south side of the square. They would proceed north up to Howard Park and across and then come back. And then the second piece, we would request that the northwest quadrant be available for our fencing for the beer garden. And we'll have the same committee that was responsible a year ago. They've done a number of the other events with Tammy Jones in the community. So we feel we have continuity to provide the security and the peace of mind that we have working with the chief and everybody else as far as a presentation for a beer garden.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Any other questions, council? I know we're not thinking about October, but I guess it is time to make plans.
pretty
So the
fast.
request then,
Right.
what's that? The request then would be for parking, the parking area to be blocked on the south
Parking
side
area
of the
on the
square.
south
for-
side of the square, so that way the
Right.
carriage can move through and not disrupt traffic flow. And then they would board and
Right.
depart.
Okay, good, and then
On and
we'll
off.
also, and we'll include the beer garden in that request for the square as well. Okay. I would
Move to
entertain a
approve.
motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by whom? Hallie? Okay, second by Hamas.
Yeah,
Any
just a
discussion?
comment, yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, this is the 8th year I'm voting no. That's
fine.
As you know, I just have a conflict with the idea of having a beer garden on a public property, and so I always vote no on those. But it is a wonderful event, and I'm really glad you do it. I really am, so.
For the second year in a row, we will have Millstream root beer also available for the
That's
crowd.
Great. Okay. Thank you. We have a motion to second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
John?
I know.
Motion
Vote
passes
no.
6-1. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, again, council, we're going to move up our awarding of the pool project. I'd ask Melanie Carlson and Andy from Burbach to give us the results of our bid opening earlier this week.
Okay, so Joy's handing out a letter from my office here, from Burbank Aquatics, that summarizes the bid opening that occurred Thursday last week here in City Hall. It's a 5-page, 6-page document. The front page starts the breakdown of the bids, which include the base bid and the bid alternates, and that continues on to the next page, the second page. At the middle of the page, it discusses the low base bid and then breaks that down into low number 1, low number 2, and low number 3. And then right below the base bid, it gives you the results for base bid plus bid alternates. And again, breaks that down into first low, second low, third low. So we had 5 prime bidders at the bid opening. And the result we care most about is, of course, the base bid and bid alternates. Leander Construction was the first low. And I'll go back here a second and explain this a little bit further. We have 3 contracts on this pool project. Contract 1 is the pool contractor. Contract 2 is the pool mechanical contractor doing the pumps, the piping, things of that nature. And contract 3 is the general contractor. And they have a choice of bidding all of those contracts or individual contracts. So of the 5 contractors that bid, 2 of them bid all 3 contracts, 2 of them bid just contract 2, and 1 bid contract 1 and contract 3 as a combo.
Not to interrupt you, but do you have this in Excel format? Because this is really hard to read.
Yeah, it's
It's a
really
pain.
confusing to look
It
at.
is.
Yeah.
We have a similar one.
I thought you'd be the one who could
figure it out.
It's confusing in Excel.
It is.
And I have it on the bid form sheet. And I don't know if that would help you or not, but
Keep going, keep going.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
why don't we move along?
it's very confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing. There's multiple bid alternates, so under contract 3, we had 9 alternates, so it gets confusing in a hurry. The next page starting at the bottom of that page, we started a discussion about the low bid. Part of our services is to review the bids and the bidders. In this case, the low bid Leander gave us 5 references, which also work as his qualifications in the spec book that we publish for the bidding. The concern we have with that is that the qualifications they gave us weren't pools of equal or similar size, or even greater would be good too. So at the bottom it says page 3 at the top. I believe that's actually page 2. But at the bottom of that, we start talking about the references that Leander provided. And they gave us 5. Each of them has their own minor issue. And that led us to recommend that you reject the low bid and go with the second low bid. So on page 2 again, first low is Leander. The total bid with bid alternates is $2,707,470. The second low bid, Leander again. So then we move to the third low bid, which is actually the second low contractor. The third low is Riccio as contract 1, Cunningham as contract 2, and then Riccio again as contract 3, for a total of $2,800,761. So, again, the reasoning for rejecting the Leander bid is strictly on the pool side of it. The qualifications that they provided to us aren't what we want to see for a pool project. One was a wading pool that is nowhere near the size of your pool, which is 7,000 square feet. And the next one is a YMCA. Some of these had aluminum pools, stainless steel gutters, things like that. The pool that you're getting is cast-in-place concrete, cast-in-place gutters. So we're looking for similarities in projects when we review qualifications, and we're also looking for size. So with that being said, we believe...
And Andy, you would say that base for the pool construction is probably the most important element that we should be considering as well? Because that was what was so glaring when we first looked at the discrepancy between 1.1 million and 1.5, $400,000 difference in that base.
Yeah,
A little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, Christensen had, Christensen Construction is another bidder in the project, and they had 1.5 listed as their contract 1 amount, and Leander had 1.1 million. So there's a difference of 400,000. And yes, that it does make you wonder. The Christensen, to give you a background on them, they just finished a pool in Nebraska for us. They were the low bidder on that. That opened this year in June. So they're experienced. Riccio Construction finished a pool in Wyoming this year for us. And they typically do 2 pools a year, I believe Riccio does. Not necessarily for us, but... So we know the other 2 are experienced, the other 2 prime bidders. Leander, we have some knowledge. It would have been 10 to 15 years ago that they worked on a project in Illinois for us as a general contractor. They did not do a pool for us at that time. And in fact, Riccio was the pool contractor on that project, and Leander was the general. So based on the qualifications they gave us, we felt that it was necessary to recommend rejecting Leander. Budget-wise, what that does is $93,000 in difference. So,
And it's still coming in under the 3.8.
3.8 was the
That was
the engineer's estimate.
No,
Yeah,
that's
that was
what
the budget.
That's what the council
Yeah,
approved,
yeah.
to spend, not to spend more than 3.8.
So we're 2.8.
And it came in.
That's under 5% of the total project size, so.
Well,
So to get me on base here, you're talking about the low base bid plus all bid alternates. Third low, Rico, Cunningham, and Rico at the $2.8 million. Is that
right.
what you're telling us as our architect is what we should be?
Yeah, we're
looking at
recommending
this
that.
point?
Yeah, we're recommending this. Technically it's third low, but it's the second lowest bidder combination because Leander was included in the first 2 lows.
Okay, so that's why second low list has been eliminated.
Right.
Because Leander
Correct.
was not recommended, and they are 2 of the 3 that are
Right. Yeah,
alternates that are there.
there's 3 people or 3 contractors that bid on contract 1 and 3, and it was Leander, Riccio, and Christensen.
Has there been any history of these contractors working together in other situations that you know of? Or would this be a first for these contractors to work together?
Riccio and Cunningham?
Yes.
I don't know for sure. We have working knowledge with Cunningham. It was, again, before me. It was probably, again, 10 years ago or so.
Cunningham is from Oskaloosa.
I'm just trying to get at whether or not there's a history of these contractors being able to work and mesh well together, or if there is some information out there that says, yeah, this might be the bid that we need to look at dollar-wise, but there may be some conflicts that have happened in other places that could occur here, which could increase costs in the long run. So that was the purpose of my question.
Well, as far as cost goes, it should not. When they bid these projects separately, and you have a contractor A and a contractor B, and there's maybe somebody was excavating and tore up some pipe. If there's an issue like that that occurs and the contractors can't work it out on their own, then we step in and,
So who is supervising construction?
we are there, if not weekly, every 2 weeks throughout the construction period. When it first starts, we're there less because you're dealing with contracts getting done, fence going up, and then until the actual hole is in the ground and dug and they start bringing that back up, we're not there as much. So once you start pouring concrete, we're there for every concrete pour of the pool, which could be 2 a week, it could be 1 a week, it could be 1 every 2 weeks. We try to do a project progress meeting for the project every 2 weeks. Again, in the winter, if it's shut down because of weather, we extend that out a little bit.
But in terms of coordinating, as Darren's question assumes, is that's your role. There isn't one of these contractors that will be above the other in terms of general contracting or coordination. Your responsibility is
the general, which in this case would be Riccio, he provides a construction schedule, and so then the contractor for number 2 would have to agree to that schedule. So for instance, if the mechanical building was the first thing that needed to be done so that the mechanical contractor can get into that building and do the piping, then he has the opportunity to say, no, I need you to get this building done by November.
Okay. And along that point, these bids were let with the understanding that we have a timetable of June 1st of next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, so there's liquidated damages in the contract that if they're over that.
Very good.
And Riccio did not bid on the mechanical portion because that's not part of their capabilities.
Right, they would have to use a sub there, and actually Leander used Cunningham as a subcontractor as well, so.
Now, Melanie, maybe you can answer this question. I know that we're looking at 2.8 here, but what are we projecting for total costs that we would have in the pool?
For the pool, including the design fees, the site design fees, and then the construction costs, we're looking at around 3.71.
Okay.
We had preliminary work, and I'm talking both the pool project and the gym project. Preliminary work such as the asbestos testing and removal of the Whitney buildings, the demolition of the Whitney buildings. You're at $240,000 there. And the gym estimate that Carly Nelson put together about 3-4 months ago was at 4.8. So if you take the numbers, the pool construction numbers with the estimates, other estimates so far, you're looking at 8.75 overall budget.
Thank you, Melanie. I just want to make sure we point out to council that even with everything else, we are within that budget area that we set for it at 3.8, which is great news. I'd recommend that we take Burbach's recommendation and award.
Do we need to do this tonight?
Third low.
Yeah,
Yes.
we need to have a resolution on this.
Why did we not get this until just now? Because this is, number one, it's a very confusing report. And then to try to digest it in a few minutes and make a recommendation that, I mean, is pretty, it's
And
frustrating.
especially since this opening was last Thursday. there was
Yeah,
at least
I just don't understand why we're just now getting this, so that's frustrating. Because it's, I mean, I just can't, I mean, the way that this is organized, it's just too hard to digest at
One
all.
thing, we didn't have it, and we didn't have internet Friday and Monday. We got struck by lightning. we didn't have any phones, we didn't have.
Because I have a similar concern to Darren about how this is gonna work coordination-wise and not having a construction manager per se.
Well, I think that's why I want to clarify. I think Burbach is our
But we-
construction manager,
we
so
have
if
a
you will
project
state
manager.
clearly that you are a construction manager, give
Yeah.
us the confidence that we
Yeah.
Yeah. and
He's
can
typically-
rely on you for
Yeah,
coordinating this
construction managers-
project.
Yeah, the construction manager's there to interpret the documents and, you know, if somebody needs a change order, they're there to review that and say, well, it's in the spec under this article. So the way we do that is, we are the construction manager for your project, and what that means is, and the reason we want to do that is because nobody knows a pool like we do. We designed it. There's a lot of small, intricate things that go into the pool, so we want to be there. Yeah. So the contract managed part of that, or the construction management, I should say, falls into our area. And then, as I was saying, if there is an issue between contractors, somebody's not getting along with A and B, first of all, it's very rare for two primes not to get together. You might have some subs that don't like each other, but the primes usually play nice with each other, and if there's an issue, we'll step in and address it. Both of these contractors we've worked with before. I don't know that they've worked together before, but they're both qualified contractors and typically have worked well with other contractors, so.
I have a question. So this bid of 2.8 million, does it include all the alternates then? All
Yeah.
the alternates, so it includes the big diving tower and the sixth lane?
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
So all these extra features we were hoping to get are included in this?
You're getting that, yep. So if you look on, it says page 5 at the top. This was faxed in, so it's got the fax page number on there. That breaks down the alternates for you in a little bit clearer format. Gives you the base bid at the top, so Rikio did contract 1 and 3, so they're listed first, and then contract 2 is listed below. We've got alternate 1, and 1, 2. Those are informational bids. So if you were to delete some deck area or add some deck area, we know what that addition number is, so that's not listed here. But you know, if you want to take out 2,000 square feet, you multiply that by the number, and that's how much that change order would be. So then, under contract 1, there's bid alternate 1-3. That's to delete the 6th lane. So that was a negative number, and because the bids came in favorable, we're not recommending that one. Keep the pool as big as you can get it. Also, the 3-meter diving tower, that was a bid alternate to reduce that to a 1-meter diving tower, and that would also bring your pool depth up a foot. So again, that was a negative bid alternate because we're reducing the scope. And again, the bids are favorable, so we're not recommending that. Then you get into contract 2, the alternate 2 is for the pool heater, to add that. Again, a couple informational bids in contract 3. We get down to natural gas, that was to add the natural gas line for the pool heater. Electricity for the pool heater, that'd be a breaker, some circuitry, some bonding, things of that nature. Then there's the concession building. The concession building has a concession room and some restroom areas that will be helpful when we're trying to meet some health codes. So we're recommending that at $269,000. Then you've got chain link fence coating. That's to vinyl coat the fence. Currently it's galvanized in the base. The vinyl coating's a nicer look. It's nicer finished product. So again, for $4,000, it seems pretty reasonable. Recommending that. Sodding was part of deleting the 6th lane. So if you're not taking the deletion of the 6th lane, you wouldn't take the sodding. Shade structures, that's for addition of 2 more shade structures. We're reusing 2 existing shade umbrellas, and then we're adding 2 shade umbrellas in that bid alternate. And storm sewer was a bid alternate that was added last minute, mainly because the gym project is somewhat behind our project. Originally, that was going to be part of the gym project to get the storm sewer out to 12th Street. So instead of putting it in the gym project, we need that storm sewer to keep the site dewatered during construction. So if it rains, we don't want all that water flushing into somebody's basement. So the storm sewer was added into this project as a bid alternate, and that's a price for that. So that one you would probably be taking regardless of what ended up. So that's the general breakdown. Our fees are listed in there. And also we give you estimated reimbursables, which would be trips, meals, if we're staying overnight, that kind of thing. And that's a not to exceed number. So hopefully it'll be less, much less than that, so.
No, this is great news. I mean, we're really, everything is being included. In fact, I'll tell you a story. We haven't announced yet, but we did receive the CAT grant for $1 million, which was, really surprised, really unexpected that we would have received that amount. We had one of the CAT board members vote against the project. And the reason they voted against the project was because we reduced it to 5 lanes. So I look forward to being able to call him and tell him that we had got our 6 lanes based on our positive bid. So it's good news. Any other questions?
I'm satisfied.
I think, the other thing too is that, a lot of work went into creating the alternate so that we could be sure we could get it within budget. Many hours went into this, so I think that the fact that we're at this point, something to celebrate. Recommend we pass this on. So Michael, motion to approve the bid, which would be awarded to the combination of Riccio and for 1 and 3 and Cunningham for 2, for a total of $2.8,761,000.
Oh, is it 2818?
I'm sorry.
That's
No,
the fourth blow.
Okay.
$2,800,761.
Yep, so moved.
Moved by Hallie.
Second.
Second by Hamas.
Just a question before we vote. Where's Riccio, where's their home base?
They're out of Gurnee, Illinois.
Gurnee, Illinois.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Against.
Please call the roll.
Hallie,
Yes.
Hamas.
Yes.
Revelinsky.
Yes.
Hamilton.
Yes.
Flournoy.
Yes.
Rasmussen.
Yes.
Ledger Caitlin.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andy, for the presentation. Next, council, I'm going to ask our city attorney, John Morrissey, to give his report. We had a zoning issue come up on a proposed crisis home. I'd like to get a report on that. We want to get information to the council tonight. I know there are a lot of neighbors here this evening. We haven't really scheduled this as a public hearing, but we want to get information out and see where this project is or isn't going from here.
Sure. First of all, I don't know how many of the council had a chance to read the paper yet tonight, but there is a story on the front page of the paper about a meeting on Saturday discussing a crisis stabilization home. So let's talk about that. I've had several calls at my office in the last week or 10 days about this. There was a news article on the radio station here last week that was a prepared statement by Ben Wright, Executive Director for Tenco over in Ottumwa. And basically it talked about a crisis home and that Tenco was excited about the opportunity to have that facility. Went on to say that it was intended as a facility that would be servicing the needs of mental health provision to persons experiencing crisis that required some stabilization, and that it would be a stable place for crisis recovery for up to 10 days. Now, various people within the city have been contacted besides myself. We called the local Tenco facility and were directed to the Ottumwa facility. I got to talk to Mr. Wright for about an hour about this. Partly I would say that Tenco went into this thing, in Mr. Wright's impression, with a belief that the shelter was in a B1 or a B2 zoned area. I asked him where he got that impression. He indicated that in the course of their acquiring the property, they had looked at some things that are on various Fairfield websites and got the impression that the same zoning that applies down around the area of the Ball Diamonds, the Fairfield Line Outlet building, and the old Cohender's greenhouse site applied 2 or 3 blocks west of there, which obviously is not the case. I expressed to him my concern that while you have uses that could be characterized as far as some of the facilities that are to the south of this a block or two as B1 or B2 uses, such as Aeron's office facility, that it's primarily a residential neighborhood, whether it's R1, R2, or R3, and there's some of each over in that area. So he asked, where is that leaving Tenco? And I indicated to him that if their purchase has already happened and they have not addressed this at City Hall, that probably they need to talk about that with local real estate counsel that they can avail themselves of as a private corporation. But that my read on it would be that if you could back up to step 1, you'd have been better to come into our planning office. You'd have been better to ask for a zoning permit, since there is some overhauling going on inside the house. I think significant remodeling for bedroom type facilities and so forth. And that your references in the zoning ordinance would require some review by a planning officer and would probably require some review by someone more in an administrative and determinative position than the planning officer. The planning officer can give you the initial impressions of whether you work within the zoning ordinance we have at the present time, or whether you need to try to work within some things that may exist under the zoning ordinance, depending upon how you define yourself. Now, I want to express that my research on this is that our present zoning code doesn't deal with, quote, crisis homes. The closest we've come to something in this area in the last few years, within the last 5 years, we had a group from Department of Corrections and from a nonprofit-based group that looked at the site of a former psychiatric clinic over across the street on Maple from the former hospital. And they were thinking of it in terms of a Department of Corrections halfway facility. The persons that would be using the facility would be people mustering out from either medium or low security facilities into a situation that would have allowed them to live in a community, have a job, and return there for a while. I know how those are supposed to work. They ran into some problems over there with difficulties with the way it was zoned for that particular building that they were interested in buying, some setback requirements, some things that the way they wanted to use the facility, they would have had to have first have had it interpreted by planning and zoning and by the Board of Adjustment with hearings afforded so that the neighborhood could have a chance to react. And they basically stepped back from that particular location and looked elsewhere. That's as close as something that could be called a crisis facility came up in another context. That dealt with people that were coming out of the criminal justice system, not people that were coming out of mental health care provision facilities and are of a type that is an entirely different nature of classification, entirely different nature of dealing under an ordinance. When I talked to Mr. Wright about whether he would have a local attorney that might represent them on their real estate questions communicate with me, he indicated to me that more likely than having a real estate attorney contact me to talk about zoning and the way to proceed, he would probably have an attorney from Cedar Rapids that they utilize for fair housing issues and for ADA issues, because that's what this facility is about. And so right away, that triggers some other concerns, because you have the Code of Federal Regulation, the U.S. Code, and things that involve the Department of Human Services and federal funding behind the State Department of Human Services for some programs that are going to enter into a discussion about this kind of provided service or facility. So you have an issue about whether there is some part of this that, and first of all, I will say our ordinances are reflected in our city's policies. Our city does not discriminate on the basis of any of the traditional standards for discrimination. We honor and comply with the American for Disabilities Act. We have a fair housing commission in our community, and so I expressed to Mr. Wright that we have, I think, a very open mind to what an attorney from Cedar Rapids might want to tell us about what he thinks of our town's questions. But at the same time, I also indicated that we have zoning ordinances that do several things. One is a zoning ordinance that would apply to your residential neighborhoods, R1, R1, or R2, or R3, do provide that, depending on your definitions, you can have a facility that deals with mental health. You can actually have a sanitarium in a neighborhood that is R1, R2, or R3. It exists by virtue of part of the zoning ordinance that allows conditional uses. Other kinds of uses would be a hospital, certain types of institutional type buildings that are in a neighborhood. You basically go to the Board of Adjustment, show them how this will impact the neighborhood, and the Board of Adjustment decides if it fits and if it is appropriate to make findings about a conditional use permit being authorized. Another area is convalescent facilities, nursing homes. Both of those areas fit some of what this is being defined as. I asked Mr. Wright, what assurances does TENCO have that you won't have people walking away from this facility? What assurances do you have that people that are in this facility are not a hazard to themselves or others? That tends to be the standards that come out of our mental health judicial code, the code that governs whether a person should be institutionalized, should be on outpatient care on the other end of the spectrum, or somewhere in between. And Mr. Wright informed me that several counties that have already been involved in establishments of some type of a crisis halfway facility in communities, most of them county seat communities, that's why they focused on us in Fairfield, have wrestled with that. The Department of Human Services standards, the State Department of Health standards, the federal standards all look at the suitability for placement as a question between the person's counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. And the standard is that no one is considered for this kind of facility unless they are already determined to be appropriate for what they call a less restrictive alternative. In mental health, much like juvenile law, the law requires that you deal with the person that may be subject to confinement at one end of the spectrum as a person who comes with an entitlement to due process and to as much liberty as possible. So the quote least restrictive alternative in this situation is not just going home on outpatient care, but it's not staying in an institution, a hospital, or a facility with confinement. That's more restrictive. Rather, this is the in-between that they're seeking to arrive at. The idea of the person being there for 5 to 10 days, 10 days maximum, is consistent with what the evaluator, mental health care professionals, file on that individual supports. If it doesn't support it, they don't go there. Now, they haven't had anybody go there yet because it isn't ready for anybody to go there yet. And they haven't had anybody that he could give me under HIPAA rules to use as an example. HIPAA rules as far as privacy of a person's health records is going to limit how much you can find out about some of this. The crisis center that had to do with the Department of Corrections concern a few years ago, you can find out quite a bit about a person's criminal history.
John?
You can go online and so forth. Yeah.
Let's get down to where does this facility stand right now in terms of our zoning laws? I mean, are they?
Right now, we have no zone.
If they were to get a patient tomorrow or a client tomorrow, would they be operating in a legal way within our community?
My thought is if somebody challenged their operation, we would have to bring them in, require them, probably warn them that they're operating outside of any permit, that they haven't defined themselves to us, that we believe at a minimum for their operation to be appropriate, they would need to take their matter to the Board of Adjustment to be determined as to whether they're convalescent, whether they're sanitarium, whether there's some hybrid that fits a definition that our code allows in a residential neighborhood. Partly also, they would have to, in applying for a permit, explain how they meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance for another item, and that is there are setbacks for a separately zoned facility for a purpose outside of the norm. The conditional use permit would still require that you look at the surrounding neighbors, and I believe if it's within 50 feet of residential facilities surrounding it, that is also something that the Board of Adjustment must consider. So they could ask for the conditional use permit. They'd have to come to the zoning office. They'd have to ask planning to schedule them with Board of Adjustment. They could ask for a conditional use permit, and they could ask for variances from the setback requirements. What the Board of Adjustment does, that's nothing we can really deal with here. The Board of Adjustment is an adjudicative body all by itself, and our zoning code specifies that it should be handled that way. Board of Adjustment would have to make their own specific findings about what they believe it is, how they define it after reviewing it, and what they think about any requests, not only for the conditional use permit, but for variances to make sure that it operates within range.
And now that we're aware of it, can we take that first step and ask them to provide that information to us?
We can do that. Sure. I will say I have not been.
Did Mr. Wright make any inquiries before he purchased the home? I mean, did he go to the Board of Adjustment, or did he do anything prior to just purchasing the house?
Well, my impression is that he's a fairly good-natured guy. He relied on some counsel from the realtor they bought the house through. I'm not going to take off on what the Realtor said or didn't say, but he relied also on some websites that weren't our official zoning map over here, which I suggested he come into the planning office and very carefully look at where that is, because right away, they're not B1 or B2, and they're off by blocks. He said that at this point, the acquisition in partnership with Optime frankly spread Tenco thin. They invested in this with the idea that it was something that was going to be a needed item in the community. They don't want to see it fail, but by the same token, they understand the concerns I expressed, that there are people asking a lot of questions, including our city itself, as far as what were you thinking? And so at this point, I think we can ask them to do those things. I have not been called yet by the attorney whose name I was given in Cedar Rapids, but I was told that probably if he calls me, it will be discussing some of the issues that have to do with regulations having to do with housing rights and ADA. And I expect that we're going to hear words like accommodation. We're going to hear words like the fairness of the situation, and also about our zoning responsibilities, that this kind of facility is entitled to be somewhere, and anybody that says they don't want it in their neighborhood and then says that, but it'd be okay in that neighborhood, probably is going to have to realize that that is an underlying principle of zoning, that every private owner is entitled to make a use of their property to its highest use, if possible, within the law. And right now, I think that there's a question about whether they've done everything they could do to be within the law. Within the law, in our ordinances, provides that once you do this permitting process and you get to talk to the Board of Adjustment, that involves notice to everybody that's within a vicinity. I believe it's 300 feet out, circular around the site. Those neighbors would be noticed. The opportunity to be heard applies both to the owner of the facility, Tenco and Optime. It also applies to everybody that may feel affected, that in some way is adjacent, or neighbors that are as generally concerned in the area. So that's due process. That's what's coming. If the city council directs me to communicate to Tenco that they need to do this, this, and this, we will start that process.
Okay. Yeah, if you'd like a motion from the council to do that, that's fine, John. If not, I would say just go ahead, but if there's someone would make a motion to inform Tenco of their responsibilities regarding Fairfield zoning and begin that due process. It's fair to them as well that they've begun this construction, and if it was under false pretenses that they purchased the home, then they also should want to move this along as quickly as possible.
Right.
But I certainly would move that John pursue this on behalf of the council.
All right.
Okay, motion by Rasmussen, second by Revelinsky. Any other discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign? Okay, thank you, John. So for everyone else to understand that we're just going to basically force this issue for them to pursue, to justify how they feel this fits within our zoning structure. Obviously, it does not at this time, and it's going to have to go through our Board of Adjustment. They do have the right to go through that public hearing process, so you'll all be alerted about the process that goes before the Board of Adjustment. And I would say that's a process that take place within the next 2 weeks to a month.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Marcia?
May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Is there, because they are ongoing with construction and all of that, can we have a stay put on the construction in the meantime?
I don't know the answer to that.
Probably not. We can ask them to do the permitting, but short of them going to the Board of Adjustment to try to resolve it, we usually don't stop
Not
people
for
in their
remodeling,
tracks.
yeah.
They proceed at their own risk, though, if the Board of Adjustment says something different than what they planned.
And John, because they're not expanding the building, there's not a new footprint. They don't have to do anything from a permitting process for renovation.
Right.
So.
It's the use that's
something
the
that-
issue.
But still, yeah, the use and the zoning is something that we should get on as quickly as possible. But I have a feeling that they'll probably slow things down once they understand that we're going to move this into a position where they're going to have to defend themselves against our zoning.
What's the address of this house again? It's on Burlington, I know, but.
It's a brick house, the second brick house in from the
804
corner of Highland.
East Burlington.
On East,
It's the brick house.
There was a fire over there a while back.
Oh, yeah, it took out the top, back half of the house.
Yeah.
And it was reconstructed from there.
Thank you for the report, John. We appreciate it, and we'll follow this very closely.
I will do the real estate part of my report later.
Yeah,
Okay.
great, thanks. The next, council, will move on to our resolutions and action items. And the first, we have 2 applications for tax abatement. The first is Agri-Industrial Plastics at 301 North 22nd Street. And as you can see, they are adding another major wing to their operations and new machinery in there. So they're have applied for a tax abatement towards that new construction.
Move to approve.
Move for approval.
Moved by Hammes and second by Revelinsky to approve the request. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you. We have a request also from Ron and Linda Hunterdos at 806 Sunset Drive. And they have also completed an addition to their home and would entertain a motion to approve the tax abatement
So
to
moved.
residential.
So I had a question on this one, actually.
Okay, so it's moved by Hammes and second by Hamilton. Discussion? Go ahead,
Sure, it
Michael.
says here under residential that it has to be a minimum of 10% added to the, improvement must increase the assessed value by a minimum of 10%.
Actually, we had that, we had a roof that was a replacement roof that was done on a home that was approved by the county assessor as being a direct improvement to the property to increase the property valuation. And so this 10% rule seems to be kind of, I don't know.
We met up your hard and fast.
If you would ask the county assessor if that is going to improve the overall value of that property, they will say yes. So I'm sure that it would fall.
And ultimately, it's their decision to make, if it meets qualifications. We're approving an application to go forward. It's up to them to say it has met the qualifications as far as the amount.
Well, these are our qualifications. These are the city's qualifications for our abatement, not this. The assessments there, that's the county assessor part, I understand that. But if it's within our own code that it has to be a minimum of 10% added value, then we should stick to our code. By law, we're bound to.
But it's $42,000 in improvements.
So assuming the property is worth.
Well, Roland's here, he can address it.
Oh, thank you. Can you tell you the total valuation on your property compared to?
If you want an exact figure.
No, just an approximate.
It was around $118,000 for the house and about $12,000 for the land. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds about
Okay.
correct.
So your original valuation was for $15,000, but the actual costs were $42,000.
It's a kitchen. It was a 12 by 12 addition to the house that wasn't there before.
Okay.
And, you got plumbing, you got.
That's it.
Yeah. So
Wiring,
breakdown.
and
Yeah.
you got the construction itself, and trust me, I've got the information, most of it right here in front of me. If you wanted to see it, it hurt.
Yeah. Well, the
was painful.
42 obviously is going to be more than 10%. 15, maybe not, but your actual costs are 42.
Yeah, some of it was to the house that was already there, but I would guess at least 30,000. At least 30,000 was the new stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Next, council, we have a resolution vacating a portion of North F Street to Fairfield Evergreen Cemetery Association. I think we had a description of this at our last meeting. This is something that was actually determined several years ago. We just never formally vacated the street, so we're asking for a resolution to vacate that portion of North F Street.
Actually, can I speak to that?
Sure, John.
I came prepared with 10 different file folders. Found the one I need. If I can send this around. Actually, you have vacated it in the past. And in 2006, the game plan was that it would be transferred after a public hearing on sale for $1 consideration to the Fairfield Evergreen Cemetery Association. This F Street piece is basically a spike of street into the cemetery. It's completely surrounded by cemetery, and it's already platted for grave sites.
Right, that'd
We're
be,
doing our housekeeping.
that's just a segment that's just north of Stone, right? Goes, if you go, continue on into F, it's actually looks as if it's a T intersection there, but this is the piece that's on the north side of Stone that goes into the cemetery grass by
That's the piece.
X number of feet.
Yeah, they'd like us to finish what we started, so the resolution I'm passing around right now authorizes the mayor and the clerk to proceed with executing a municipal quitclaim deed to Evergreen Cemetery Association for the understood nominal consideration. But I did some research, and basically, even though we vacated it in 2006, there's nothing wrong with deciding to transfer it 8 years later to finish the process. Sometimes you do this together. For instance, what you did with the Methodist Church, you did these 2 weeks apart, but there's nothing wrong with doing it this way.
8 years apart.
If you resolve to transfer it to them, I'll see that they get their deed.
I think I was in this seat when this went down the first time, so I would
That's
make
right.
a motion to approve the resolution.
Motion by Hamilton, second by Rasmussen. Any other discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll get it over to the courthouse soon, right, John? Okay. Next, we're going to look at 2 items regarding our downtown facade project. I'll ask Melanie to lead us through those. First would be an agreement with Curtis Architecture for the downtown facade.
Originals. And I only have 2 copies of the agreement, and Rod Curtis is here, and he can speak to his agreement, but I wanted to give you, an update on the facade project as a whole. At your last council meeting, you accepted the committee's recommendation to hire Curtis Architecture, and so this is his agreement for the design and construction administration, or construction, engineering during construction is what I'd call it on my end. I'm not sure what architects call it, but construction services as well. We will be having a public meeting, meet your architect type meeting on September 4th at 7 p.m. We sent letters to the property owners so they have a chance to meet Rod. And so I don't know, Rod, do you have anything else you'd like to come introduce yourself to the council?
I don't, just 1 minute. I'll just give face to the name and introduce my long hair so it's not a shock later on.
Do you get that a lot, Rod?
Once in a while.
Yeah, that's too good. All right, thanks. We appreciate you having on board. I know that the committee's very excited to get rolling on the project, so.
As we are.
Yeah, good.
So his agreement is a not to exceed amount of $93,500.
I don't know whether we originally had a budgeted item for this, but I think when we were first looking at it, we thought that the design fees would be about $100,000, so, yeah.
I would move that we approve the agreement.
Have you seen it?
It's right here.
That's right.
Oh, I have not seen it yet.
I haven't
I'm gonna
read
wait
all
till
the way
Jessica
through
looks
it.
over it.
but-
It's pretty standard.
Yeah, it's an AIA document B101 from 2007, which is a standard kind of boilerplate agreement. And I'm certain that since Melanie Carlson's name is on here representing French Reniker in the city of Fairfield, she has had a chance to review this document. Do you have any concerns that you would want to express with it?
All the concerns we had, he's addressed. For example, there was no auto liability in there, that got corrected. Trying to think of what other issues we had, but he did get them all corrected today.
Okay.
And also, I guess another item was that he did have a markup for any sub-consultants that would be needed. CDBG does not allow that. That got corrected as well. So CDBG has looked at this as well as Matt Bauman with the regional planning.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Hamilton, second by Hallie. Any other discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Hamilton.
Yes.
Hallie.
Yes.
Flournoy.
Yes.
Rasmussen.
Yes.
Hamas.
Yes.
Ledger Caitlin.
Yes.
Rivalinsky.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'd just like to just point out too, is picking up Jessica's frustration about this, is just that if we do have electronic glitches in the future between council meetings, let's get hard copy to our council so that they have everything to review ahead of time. Next, then, we have authorization of a contract with the historical architect for a downtown facade project. If you could explain the direction we're going with this, Melanie?
Yep. So not a sub-consultant, an additional contractor is needed for this, and this is filling out the state historic paperwork that would determine the historic eligibility of each of the buildings. Regional planning put out a request for proposals on this, and this letter indicates that it was sent to 3 firms, and only one of the 3 firms responded, Molly Nauman. She has done a lot of work within the city. She comes highly recommended from Mark Schaefer. And so her proposal, you don't have an agreement in front of you. I received that at the last minute, so obviously we'll look over the terms and the conditions of her contract before that gets signed. But we would recommend that you accept her bid for the work, which is $4,250 for 17 buildings. So as the property owners, as we're still determining which buildings are included in this, that allows some flexibility in her bid. But if we would choose to do all of the buildings, to maybe determine if the whole square is eligible for a historic district, that is $250 per site beyond that original 17. So this letter just indicates to the state that you did put out for multiple people to bid on this, and only one responded. That shows that you're not being, that you did go through a public process on this.
How many properties are total possible there?
15 is what the application requires for CDBG.
It requires, but I mean, if we.
Additional sites that might include, if you
Like,
did the whole square, how many sites?
Yeah, that's my question.
25.
I see.
Did you not hear anything from William Page?
No, no one else responded.
I mean, because he has Fairfield ties, that was the reason I thought. I was surprised that you didn't, hear from him.
Yeah, Mark Schaefer helped us select the people that got sent the proposals as well.
So if every property, if we had about 25 properties, the max amount we would spend on this portion would be about $7,500.
I haven't done the math, but I'll believe you.
25 times 25.
But the 8 additional buildings at $250 each. It's another $2,000.
2,000 more.
Over the 4,250 we're approving, so maximum would be 6250.
There you go. That's what I said.
No, you weren't in error. You were just trying to overthink things.
Oh, yeah, I was.
6250
is better than 7,500.
Well, we'd have to approve those additional buildings anyways.
Move to approve.
Yes.
Second.
Moved by Amos to approve, second by Flournoy. Any other discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign? Thank you. Next, council, we have a memorandum of agreement on the Natty property regarding some leases. Derek, is there anything at that, or John, you're going to? Okay, great.
The reason this is on your agenda, about a year and a half ago, the Nady family and Robert Nady Trust gifted to the city a piece of property over by the Waterworks Park Lake. It's 50-some acres, and it's subject to a conservation easement agreement and some other things that are administered partly by the Conservation Board, partly by us, and it's farmed to the extent it can be farmed by Larry Deers. And this agreement wouldn't be a whole lot different than a lot of other maintenance agreements where there's a CRP part to the property, and there's some other understandings about good husbandry for the particular conservation easement, except that it's an agreement for from now until 2029, I believe. And anytime you have a lease that exceeds 2 years, you need to treat it as though it's a conveyance of a substantial property interest under the state code. So you're basically considering this, and it's on your agenda because you need to formally approve that you're going long-term with this. It will be recorded. It will be something that ties the land and the way the land is used for a long time. So as long as the farming tenant functions under this agreement, he adheres to the conservation easement, which was filed before it was gifted to the city, and he follows the CRP rules and the management plans that both the city inputs on and the Conservation Board inputs in. He could be there still doing this in 2029, I guess, and we'll review it again then. We're all here, right? But anyway, the reason you have it is we do need to follow Code Section 364.7 and approve a 3-year or longer lease, which is this amounts to. It's partly lease, partly maintenance and management agreement. We could end up paying the farming tenant for some of the things he does, but in the end, he agrees to pay us some fees each year, which could be reduced by what he does. So,
John?
Other than that, Derek knows answers to specific questions. I just know what we're about.
John, question.
Yeah.
So this is a lease for 1 year for use of this land, not 15 years, right?
No.
So this is a 15-year lease?
This agreement, if you turn to the top of page 2, says that the term of the lease will be from March 1, 2014 to September 30th of 2015 with the intent to extend it through CRP contracts, current and proposed, or September 2029. So it's just going to keep on renewing, assuming that nobody screws it up.
But that's CRP contracts, that's not farming.
Right.
Well,
and that's where my questions are going to come at.
So what,
next.
what are the distinctions there? Because our understanding was that we were hoping that the farming leases would be short-term,
Yeah.
and that we would begin the process of converting it to its conservation nature.
Farming's gonna be done this fall.
Short-term, yeah.
Speak to, yeah.
Yeah. And then we're gonna,
Part of it's in the conservation easement,
here?
long-term development plan, and Derek knows that.
So he's gonna quit farming in this fall, but then we're gonna pick up doing the CRP contracts after this fall for a long time.
So it will be converted to CRP, it will no longer be farmed, the whole,
It will no longer be
the whole property.
So
Okay, that explains it.
So the section of row crop for $150 per acre only applies until the crops are out this year.
Right.
And from that point on, we won't be doing any row cropping out there at all. So we won't have that $150 an acre income from that. We'll
Right.
just be monitoring the CRP ground that's out there.
Yeah, you're just exchanging that for
Oh,
CRP.
because I had some concerns with the price per acre. That seems to be pretty low on today's market for what people lease
But not
farm
for
ground.
farming, yeah. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
for
But for
row
CRP,
crops.
So he
But-
will maintain the CRP land, that's what you're
He
referring to.
he could still theoretically obtain a crop if it's allowed by CRP.
Uh-huh.
When we had a drought a few years ago,
Right,
everybody was making hay on the CRP.
Right.
ground,
CRP.
And the farmers were taking it for little or no money because it was quote allowed.
The good deal that we're getting here with Larry is with CRP, the federal government's paying that.
Right.
So we can't be like we can't take care of the land because the federal can't pay the city. So that's where Larry comes in, and he was graciously is donating that money that he receives with that federal money and donating it back to the city for us to do what we want with it, which is put it back towards that property, developing it. So, it's a self-sustaining project.
Derek, is he donating it back or is he paying us this lease?
Donating it back.
So separate from this lease, he's making a donation?
Making a donation. So I'm guessing at the end of the year, we'll have about $8,000. And then if we need improvements done, like we need him to mow, want to burn, we'll pay him to do that out of that donation that he's given us back
Where's that money going?
to the Park and Rec Foundation.
So Derek, this does not in any way interfere with the plans that we were shown a few months ago.
Do they have the contract?
I think you have it, as each of you have it on your tablet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a link to it here, yeah.
The other thing you should understand is the reason it's not stated under rental rates and arrangements as something different, like the term gift, is it's difficult to enforce a gift. But it isn't difficult at all to enforce an assignment, and he agrees to assign the CRP each time that it is accrued.
Is there some reason why we're doing this through him as opposed to just applying for CRP status ourselves as a city?
We need a tenant.
We do need a tenant, yeah, that's the answer. Got it.
All right. And he has been the long-term renter of this property out there.
Yep. The previous owner had a great relationship with him, and we're just gonna
Continue that, that's another.
So the family's aware that this is going on also?
Correct.
That's perfect. Okay.
Excellent.
I remember when the family first gifted this to the city, they requested that he be allowed to farm it for, I think, 3 seasons. This would be the end of that last season.
Council, I think entertaining enough understanding of this now, I want to entertain a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement with Larry Deers.
Move to approve.
Moved by Ledger Kalin, second by Hamilton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you. Next, Council, we do have a bid for the South Second Street overlay. Melanie, if you could give us the facts on that.
Because this was a project less than $130,000, we went through a quote process, which does not require public hearing, public notice. So we did send it out to 2, maybe 3 companies, but we sent it to Norris of Ottumwa, and
It's
been a long council
Were they
meeting.
the only ones that returned a quote then?
Yes.
Because that's the only one that's on the list.
yes. The other one that we sent information to did not return a quote.
Shipley?
No, Shipley, Cessford.
Cessford.
Thank you. I apologize, long meeting. So Norris was the only quote that was returned for a total of $98,572 for the overlay of 2nd Street.
And that's the area that's currently milled from Burlington south down to Washington.
Almost
Yeah, a little
Almost
farther.
Madison.
Almost Madison.
Yep.
And then, is there any timeline on when this contract would begin? Is this as soon as possible, or are we gonna get put off until next spring and have brick there exposed all winter?
They have a completion date of November 15th. but they indicate that they'll be here in September when they start working on the road for the county as well.
Oh, okay.
So they'll be here shortly.
I move to approve.
Moved by Ledger Kalin to approve, second by Revelinsky. Any other discussion? Was it Doug Flournoy? John, you looked at me.
John was thinking about it.
I looked over, you looked, said, yeah, it was me. Second by Flournoy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you. Okay, next, council, we'd like an authorization for our gym designer, architect Newman Munson, to proceed with the gym design. The reason why I ask your approval is that they had done some very basic work to give us an idea of what we could do with the redesign when we did that several months ago, and also giving the contractor and the ability to start to work up some mock bids, which gave us the confidence to go ahead with planning the building based on $4.8 million. So at this point in time, we would like to just give them the authorization, knowing that we are within, well, actually, let's talk about that for a second. Yeah. We received the CAT grant with the caveat that we raise an additional $240,000 in private, of which, as of today, $73,000 has been raised. We have 60 days to do that. Tom McMahon and his team are working hard on that, and have high confidence that will all come in within the 60-day period. So I think we're going to be fine there. We're obviously so close, even with the amounts that we are at right now, and the fact that the pool came in $100,000 under budget. So I think with that, we should go ahead and tell our design team of Newman Munson to go ahead and continue with that, because obviously that's something we want to follow very quickly behind the pool in terms of construction as well.
So
moved by Revelinsky.
Second.
Second by Ledger Kalin. Melanie, anything to add?
Derek just received an email from Newman Munson. Expected schedule would be that design would occur this winter. Construction could start during winter if it's a mild winter, but look forward to spring 2015 starting construction on the gym.
Okay.
And they indicated that it'd be into 16 by the time it would actually be open.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Please call the roll.
Revelinsky.
Yes.
Ledger Kalin.
Yes.
Rasmussen.
Yes.
Flournoy.
Yes.
Hamas.
Yes.
Hamilton.
Yes.
Hallie.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, council, we have two engineering services agreements related to the pool and recreation project. John, give us our presentation on that. Welcome.
Yes, Melanie asked me to help her out and put these together for her, or help her with them, so I took the lead. The first agreement is for the parking lot at the rec center. Because it is being financed with the state revolving fund sponsored project monies, after we discussed this with Carly Nelson, decided the best way to do this so that those costs can be fully segregated for that drawdown process is to make it a separate agreement. In essence, it's a 72 space parking lot, although we're losing some, so the net gain is about 60 spaces. It's a parking lot with pervious pavement. It has a design fee of $27,000. Our construction-related services is $18,000 for a total of $45,000. And as I said, this will be paid for with the state revolving fund sponsored project money.
And John, remind us where exactly on the property this lot is? It's on the north side of the building?
It would be on the north side of the proposed gym. In essence, behind the dairy barn, yes.
Right.
I didn't want to say sweet spot, because that's not where it is.
I move to approve.
Moved by Ledger Kalin to approve the services agreement. Second by Hamilton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you.
The second agreement we bring to you, it relates to part of the project that you already have awarded, We proceeded with work on the civil part of the pool project at our own risk. This is actually the agreement for those services. It involves the grading outside of the pool enclosure, the access road to 9th Street, utilities to the site, which include sewer, water, and gas, and the storm sewer portion that was included in the project. The portion that relates to the gym is actually working in concert with Newman Munson to do the civil site work around the building. It's the site grading, sidewalk, the trail part that goes through it, the stormwater pollution prevention plan. The design fee for all of that is about $22,000, or is the design and engineering during construction, because Carly Nelson is taking the lead on the work during construction. It is a lump sum of $22,000. For what it's worth, the part that's related to the pool, is about $8,000, and the gym is about $14,000. And I will say that we normally do not like to bring engineering agreements to you after the fact, but this is one of those where let's put it this way, the scope on the pool project was a little bit nebulous for a long time, so this relates to that. So.
Move to approve.
Moved by Ledger-Kalen to approve the services agreement.
Second.
Second by Hamilton. Any other discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, Council, we'll move into our public hearing for the sale of general obligation bonds totaling $750,000. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time and ask if there's any public comment. Okay. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and move on to the approval of the issuance of $750,000 general obligation capital notes. And again, you understand that these are dollars that we have also already spent in some regard on projects relative to South Main.
It'll be reimbursed through tax increment financing.
Right.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Hallie, second by Revelinsky. Any discussion? Now please call the roll.
Hallie?
Yes.
Revelinsky?
Well, I'm wondering if we were supposed to set the date and time.
We already did the public hearing.
We did that.
Okay, we're just saying that this was, okay, sorry.
That was just, I think, the
Revelinsky.
opening of the public
Yes.
hearing.
Right.
We did that last meeting,
Okay.
set it for tonight, yeah.
Ledger-Kalen?
Yes.
Hamilton?
Yes.
Hamas?
Yes.
Flournoy?
Yes.
Rasmussen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, Council, we have a rezoning request coming to us from Planning and Zoning, and this is a property at 300 West Kirkwood. It is at the present time zoned B1.
East Kirkwood, right?
Pardon me?
East Kirkwood.
East Kirkwood.
Oh, it is
No, it's west, yeah.
Oh, it says in here,
Ordinance is
east.
printed wrong.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading from the agenda. It says west.
Okay, ordinance says east.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll need to be corrected.
So we'll have to amend that. But this property, it's on the corner of West Kirkwood and North Third. It is in a residential area. It is currently zoned B1. And the request is to return it to R2.
May I address the council on that issue?
Pardon me?
May I address the council?
Yes, this is public hearing, so yes, you're welcome to do that. Declare that open.
My name is Marcia Laux. Hi to many of you. I haven't
Hi,
seen you
Marcia.
for many years. Excuse me. My husband and I own the property just, used to be the Fairfield Flower Shop right behind this. We've got some concerns about this rezoning and what it would do to the ability for us to use this property that we have, the lot, for business purposes. So I think the setbacks would change if it went to residential. It would basically make our lot useless, and because we couldn't build for so far back. So I have a major concern with that part of it. Also, I don't know what the issues are for putting it back to residential, but the house, I think, needs to be condemned. It is unsafe There's not electrical, it looks like things are laying, and we do have stuff on our property from the garage that is falling apart on this house. And, you know, we try to do what we can do at our properties around town, the rentals that we have, to take care of those and take really good condition of those. And, you know, sometimes we're called to fix things like when there's weeds, we do that right away. And I think as whoever takes care of that and contacts my husband, and he comes in, he has a really good working relationship with that. So we have a really big concern with the rezoning of this at that time. We have plans for that property, and this would definitely diminish the use and the ability for us to follow forth on those plans.
Okay, so Marcia, your property right now is Zone B1?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And can you explain, or John, can you help us explain where this change might encumber Marcia's plans for property next door? I mean, it's not, her zoning isn't going to change with this, but what kinds of things could inhibit them from using the property in a business?
Does the residential setback change on zoning versus residential and commercial?
Yes.
Okay.
Generally, there's no setback in the business zone areas, and the residential, except for variances where you're able to convince the Board of Adjustment that there's some reason why you should allow one a different amount of space. It's theoretical that you could have a residential next to it that would have a much different setback because Board of Adjustment thought it wasn't going to look any different than the rest of the.
But that only affects the residential property though, correct? The building setback on the commercial property next door still remains
That won't
the same?
change.
So that won't change, Marcia?
Yeah.
That will not change. That's
No.
not my understanding from the zoning. Is that?
Was it Rebecca?
Yeah.
Did you speak with Rebecca
Yes, I
about that?
spoke with Rebecca.
Okay,
And she said that would change.
okay.
I don't.
Yeah,
You're
doesn't
already
make sense that it
pre-existing
would.
zoned status, so.
So what we went to build on that wouldn't change if it was residential versus.
You still have a previously zoned commercial purpose.
Okay.
And I don't think that what they do on the neighboring site can change your right to use it under your pre-existing use, zoning status. I want to use the term grandfathered, but that's not quite the right.
Yeah, because it is a vacant lot. That's my concern also, because it is a vacant lot. And so if we go to build something on that lot.
My opinion is your ability to use it like the zoning status that it has will stay there.
There is something in the code that I think Rebecca was referencing for new construction. When two different districts border each other, the more strict setbacks apply. So because her lot is empty, at least when I've looked at other construction projects, her lot is empty. When she goes to build something, her lot would be required to meet the residential setback.
So she would have to have a 35-foot setback at the
Exactly.
back line of the property and
10 foot on
10 foot on
And
each
it's not a
side
big
then?
lot anyway, and the use that we had
So-
intended would not work.
I presume you missed a planning and zoning meeting, right?
No, this was the notice that we got to come here for this.
Okay, because this was taken up by planning and zoning and approved it. It would have been good to bring this up to them. but,
I suggest it goes back to planning and zoning.
Yeah.
I mean, it says in their notes that the property.
This is our
owner-
notice of public hearing.
No, I'm
No,
not
that's fine.
blaming you. I'm just.
There was a step.
Yeah.
There was a
Yeah,
step
it
that
should
we
go to planning and
missed.
zoning, and I think that's what we need to do here. Go, give it back to them, let them take into account your input, and come back with another recommendation again.
Yeah,
So I'd
and
move
the
that
other
we do
thing,
that.
if you're gonna look at residential, you really need to look at the condition of the property.
Right.
It's in
Yeah, I can
very,
see
very
from-
poor
And
condition.
that's also part of their responsibility as the Board of Adjustment Planning and Zoning Board. They should be looking into that status of the property as to whether it's really habitable or not for the use that they want to change it to.
Okay.
So there's been a recommendation, there has not been a hearing.
Before we do that, we do have one other representative of the property. Should you come up to the microphone to speak? Sorry, it's part of the deal.
Yeah, I know. I just kind of got thrown into this, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on. I did just text Dr. Butler that there was somebody here, she asked me why. I told her. I just want to make sure that I understand what she needs to do when I leave here, that I'm able to tell her.
So you're representing Dr. Butler, who owns the property and is requesting
She
the rezoning.
does, and she is aware. I think, I know personally, just for working with her, that she does have somebody hired to fix what fell down, I think, once the flower shop was tore down, but it's gonna take 3 weeks. I don't know. And I do know that she is planning on remodeling it, I think renovating it, I think.
Okay. Well, but it appears, I would just, give her the message that we don't feel that, one of the residents, that your neighbor was given the adequate hearing through planning and zoning, and we're going to send it back to planning and zoning so that they can review this again and make a different recommendation.
With the input of the adjoining.
Perfect.
Exactly.
So I would make a motion, we take it to planning.
Any other?
Again.
No, my concern though, maybe somebody needs to look at the condition of the property, of course, but I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Would let me know when
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you'll receive a letter again, sure.
Thank you very
Thanks. So we'll close the public hearing at this time, and motion by Revelinsky to send this back to planning and zoning for review. Second by Rasmussen. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you. And then, council, we have second reading of our ordinance 1121, which is essentially allowing for the use of funds within the TIF district of West Burlington. This is a public hearing. We'll open the floor to public hearing this time, if there's any public comment. No, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion to move from the second and third reading.
Motion. I move to move.
Moved by Ledger Kalen.
Second to the third reading. Tongue tied.
Second by Hamilton. Please call the roll.
Ledger Kalen.
Yes.
Hamilton.
Yes.
Flournoy.
Yes.
Hallie.
Yes.
Rasmussen.
Yes.
Hamas.
Yes.
Revelinsky.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Council, in my report, I just wanted to make you aware of issuing a proclamation for Suicide Prevention Week. Iowa has a Suicide Prevention Week, September 8th through 14th. This was brought to my attention by local professional care providers who are putting together an effort within Jefferson County to address some of the alarming statistics as that there have been 19 people who committed suicide in Jefferson County from 2008 to 2012, and three suicides within Jefferson County in 2014. It is obviously the passing of Robin Williams brought this to national attention. I believe there are going to be efforts to have more visible intervention services within the county, and in support of those efforts and calling the attention to the status of this in our community, issuing this proclamation to declare September 7th as Fairfield Suicide Prevention Day and September 8th through 14th in alignment with Iowa Suicide Prevention Week. Entertain a motion to approve the proclamation.
Move to approve.
Moved by Hallie.
Second.
Second by Hamilton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you. That is all I had. We'll move on to, John, was there anything else that you needed to present to us? To the attorney report?
Come on.
Very gifts for everyone.
Oh, some of those fell to the floor, the gifts.
All right. We were in closed session after the last council meeting, you authorized our acquisition agent and myself to proceed. You're going to see some more of these resolutions over the next few months, I hope. But this is what it looks like when you voluntarily acquire something that's slated under eminent domain as an acquisition for a public purpose project where we have to get the property one way or another. And what you have in front of you first is a resolution that takes you through what we did to comply with our due process requirements to put the person affected on notice. And essentially the first one you have in front of you is a permanent and a temporary easement acquisition from the Joneses. This will be one of many permanent and temporary easements that you're going to get documents like this for, but each of them comes with a determined valuation for the site. Each of them comes with a set of property owners' rights and some negotiation from our land acquisition agent that will be outlined. The important part of this is that after all the due process that we have afforded, the notice and opportunity for input, and the attempts at a fair offer, and then some renegotiated additional offer, our property owner in this situation voluntarily agrees to let us acquire what we need. So the first of these is for a permanent easement for less than an acre and a temporary easement for construction purposes around it. Our offer that was an increased offer came in at, I believe, for some reason I've got 2 pages stapled together, I apologize here. $7,590 is the price that we talked about in closed session. You authorized us to proceed on. So what we need to do is approve this formally so that we can go through a transaction closing with these folks. We have to pay them their money and then they have to convey to us. So I'm asking your authorization to do this on a permanent and temporary easement, to be the first of this type of document that you get.
Entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Moved by Ledger Kalen, second by Hamilton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, number one.
Very good. Got to start somewhere. Here's the second one, and this is one that's part of a critical piece of the puzzle. This involves the Myers land acquisition, which is part of the site for our expanded storage tank. And the way we proceed on this is we had an appraisal, we had a review appraisal, we had an updated appraisal. We also, in addition to the appraisal price, we offered some relocation expense, and we came up with a figure that allowed them to buy a property that they wanted, plus have some money paid for relocation expense in addition. We already have a closing date set to buy them the property that will replace the property we're taking from them. That will be as soon as September 2nd if you go along with this, which is what we talked about in closed session. And our property acquisition agent, our engineers, and I guess myself, we all feel this is a very reasonable deal with the Myers couple as far as their acres that they will sell to us outright by a warranty deed. There will be reference in it to the fact that this is pursuant to due process procedures under the parts of the code that have to do with 6B2A and the eminent domain statute. So it's important that we mention that we have complied with this. This resolution will become a part of the transfer document, and there are a couple other things that go with this. If they find that there are other things that they should have been compensated for, we follow this after our transfer completion and closing with them with a notice that for 5 years after this acquisition, they still have a right to come back to us and tell us they discovered something else about what the compensation that they were given amounted to that should have been greater in a particular area. I can only think of a couple of examples in our airport experience. One of them had to do with some drainage problems on one of the properties next to the runway area that weren't foreseen. We went out, spent a few $1,000s on some additional drainage work and culvert work to clean that up, but that was within the 5-year period. Other than that, we had one of the other people that acquired an interest in property after it had gone through the due process procedures out there that tried to tell us we owed them hundreds of thousands of dollars. That didn't happen, but it still, we have to be aware that we're going to probably have 80 or so of these acquisitions over the course of this expansion project for wastewater. Some of them will be quite small, but all of them involve the due process procedures and the premise that we have to get this one way or another, so you folks understand that we're here.
I'd like to see more of them in our consent agenda, though.
Yes. Just start the ball rolling, okay?
So this is a $209,000 is the payment amount. So motion by Hamilton to approve. Second by Rasmussen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another one, John? Great, thank you very much. All right. No, I think it's really great to get this particular piece of the Myers done, so good work to everybody involved there. Next, we'll move on to our committee reports, public safety, transportation.
I'll make mine short. We met last Monday, we discussed 6 items. The first 2 was the entrance into Hy-Vee gas off Burlington Avenue and the filming permit policies. We had good ideas and thoughts on both. We're going to meet one more time on those and get those put together for a final council approval. We then talked about a reserved parking request at 103 East Adams. Turned out that was private property, nothing we could do on that, so no action taken. We then discussed handicap parking request at 801 North 9th Street. The committee looked at that. The person making the request was not present, but they have their own private driveway, and there's no parking on their side of the street, so they have to park across the street anyway. So the committee decided to deny that request. We had a request out on South 33rd Street to look at some culvert issues, some water not draining issues. The committee decided it did need further looking into, and we did need to help them resolve the issue. Melanie's doing some more work on that for us. And then we talked about the gravel coming out of 4th Street parking lot onto Low Street when it rains, and ideas how to fix that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tony, but no recommended action at this time. All right. Thanks very much for your report. Water, Sewer Utilities Committee.
The committee met prior to our meeting this evening. We had 2 items on the agenda for adjustment of water bills. The first item concerned a meter spike that had occurred with water going through it. We have set that we are going to credit back to that customer's account the sewer portion of the bill minus what would have been usual and customary for the property. That equates to about $520. But further investigation on the meter itself is going to take place, and we are recommending to Carl to swap that meter out for a remote read meter. The second was a similar situation, but the dollar amount was greatly reduced. We were talking about a total of about $35 in that case, and the committee has moved to credit that back to that person's account. So, and that was our committee meeting prior to the council.
Okay. And then you had
And then we were discussing uses of property earlier in our meeting here. A while back, the council went through rezoning of a property down on West Tyler, which is the old Nelson Nursing Home. At that time, Taylor, sorry. Anyway, long meeting. Anyway, at the time that we rezoned that from R2 to R3, it was stated in the meeting, but not recorded in the physical written minutes, that the property would revert back to R2, which originally was, if it wasn't used for the purpose intended.
Right.
Now the property is being advertised as commercial on FIDA's website, and it is not zoned for that. It is also had some concerns from the neighbors that there has been activity out on the site, work either on the building or something that went on with the property itself. But with discussions with the person that was out there, they didn't clearly understand what the intent was going to be with the property. And the neighbors are concerned that the city should fulfill what its intent was, that if the property wasn't converted into a multifamily unit apartment, that it would revert back as it was discussed. And so I'm asking that the council look into this a little bit further, and that at our next meeting we have a full discussion on what the intent was of the council at the time concerning the nature of the property.
Okay. So we did go through the process. We did complete the zoning then.
The zoning was completed. It is zoned R3.
But it was stated at the time.
Right. But I wouldn't think that there would be any, we would probably just have to go through the whole process again, John, would we not? Of getting it rezoned to R2. I don't know that we can do it by a motion or resolution based on something that was intended to be said during the process.
I think, John, you're the one who said it. I could
Yeah, but
be.
it's still, I don't know that we've got the stature,
comment
the
on it?
legal stature to do that.
If we don't have something written to support the position it's going to take, it's going to be very difficult dealing with that piece of real estate. Yes, I was recalling back, there is hearing to be had on it, discussion, but I guess I didn't realize we didn't have anything written down.
No, we had the resolution that changes zoning from R2 to R3, and we had great discussion over several meetings as far as what the status of that property was actually going to be. And the assurances that the adjacent property owners felt came out of that was that if that was not converted into a residential multifamily unit property, that it would go back to the R2 status that it had previously. So the bigger concern, though, lies in the marketing of the property as being commercial. And my understanding from the assessor is that if a property is zoned for multifamily 3 or more, then she reflects that as a commercial type property when she does her description of the property itself. And that poses concerns for the neighbors because they see the word commercial and think that it could be used for some sort of manufacturing or some sort of other type of commercial interest right there in a residential neighborhood. So they have asked me to bring this to the council so that we could get a better clarification of what's going on and how this is being marketed.
Okay.
And
I just think,
Your
John,
concerns.
if you would give us an opinion on that so we can at least get an answer back to those folks.
I'll take a look at what we got.
Okay,
I have one contact with the neighborhood down there that gets information out to everybody once I speak to them, so, okay.
thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
Next, council, it's also October, time to set trick-or-treat night, Chief. Word on that?
So October 30th from 5:30 to 8 o'clock will be trick or treat night. There's a away football game on Friday night, so that's why we didn't have it on Friday night. And the only other thing I have to add is that the emergency management coordinator has upgraded our outdoor warning system. They work sporadically, so and we are getting parts from somebody's scrapyard. So it is a huge kudos to him. He applied for a grant, received a grant that paid for the majority, correct, Joy? The majority of those charges.
At least half of it.
But again, this is an outdoor warning system, so people saying they don't hear them in their house, it's for outdoor only.
Great, thank you, Chief. So entertain a motion then to set trick-or-treat night for October 30th, 5:30 PM to 8 PM. Moved by Hamilton, second by Rasmussen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Thank you. And Melanie, I know you don't have much.
I'll be super quick. Since Kevin left several months ago, I've tried to do once a month project updates of everything that's going on. If any of you do not have my French Reniker email address or my cell phone number, I have my card. So please contact me anytime you have questions on the projects that's going on. Don't wait for my once a month update. Hopefully by my next update within a month, a majority of these projects will be done or under construction, including the pool, the skate park, 12th and Burlington, the water main project, and the 2nd Street overlay. So September looks to be busy, and I hope to have maybe just a 2-page report rather than a 3-page report. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Any questions for Melanie?
John's already packed up, so he's
Thanks, Melanie. Council also received a letter from Mayor Lazio of Ottumwa, and there will be a meeting on September 11th from 6:30 PM to 8:30 PM on open meetings and open records laws. This will be held at the Bridgeview Center, and all elected officials are welcome to attend. I'll make copies of this invitation, put it all in your mailboxes, but I just wanted to make notice of that. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Moved by Hamilton.
Second.
Second by Ledger Kalin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned.